Alrighty, ready to kick it off?
I think so.
All right. Fantastic. Well, let me kick it off. So, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along to the Brisbane Azure user group for tonight. We've got a fantastic international event lined up for you today. So it's not only is it an international event, it's an international lockdown isolation event, which everyone can join and follow along at home. So welcome. So August 2020 International Isolation Lockdown event. First of all, big thanks for our sponsors. So Microsoft, as always, and Codify. So they're the guys that make all this possible. So thanks very much for your help. And before we get into the details, I just want to throw it out there and say, look, this is a great event and you can learn lots of stuff, but it's only possible with people like you. So everybody can help contribute to this. And the way you can help is just getting involved. So sharing what you do. So we've had a bunch of really awesome things happen this year. So lots and lots of great presentations from everyone. Super interested in the one tonight. So we've got Wagner coming to you from New Zealand, and it should be awesome. API Management. Next month we've got a blazeringly simple, secure application development with immutable infrastructure. So that's a mouthful there, but I've been led to believe that it's all about how do you get Blazor app into production with little or no effort on an Azure platform, but make sure it's secure. So it's things like front door app service and that sort of stuff. And then there's two spots. So yes, anyone who's here today, let us know. We're keen to have you along for the next two events before we get into the Unconvention night. So and then the Unconvention night in December is just a bunch of little tiny demos from lots and lots of people. So if you've got something to share, let us know. We're keen to slot you in October or November. Alrighty, so just a few updates. Not a huge lot today, but some things that were interesting. So blob storage, 200 terabyte objects. So finally something that'll take my email, and maybe a little bit more, but it's crazy. Like 200 terabytes in a single object. Yeah, that's probably big enough. But you can see there the structure, how it, storage account, containers, blobs, and then there's blocks within the blobs, and there's up to 50,000 blocks within that blob. That's a 40 times increase over the current 5 terabyte size. Shared disks. So shared disks allow you to attach a single disk to multiple VMs. Pretty cool. And so the way it works is they've got mount points and you basically pay per mount point. So the caveat is that it's got to be a P15 or above disk. So it's a premium sort of storage, but you can have that same disk connected to multiple VMs, which is pretty cool. So we're all in COVID all the way around the world. So a bunch of things have dropped for virtual desktops to augment that capability. So it's just a packaging of a lot of features that they have, but they've packaged a lot of it into the portal. So it gives you a greater visibility of what's going on. So things like role-based access control and user management and monitoring. So that's all now being folded into the portal. So just a better user experience so you can see what's going on in that land. Cost management, we've got some new things in that you can see things that haven't been tagged. So where they have no value or untagged, you can now drill into that as well. So it's a little thing, but it's pretty handy because often the things that are the ones that you're trying to find out what's costing you the money are the ones that are not managed. The ones that are not managed are probably the ones that aren't tagged. So, pretty handy when you're trying to track that down. This one was interesting. So HashiCorp. So for all those people who like Kubernetes, So HashiCorp's got a multi-cloud SaaS solution that's AWS, Google, and Azure. And I think it's on-premises, well, custom as well. But what HashiCorp do is they'll manage the console servers, and they'll sort of abstract a lot of that AKS stuff away from you, so you don't have to worry about managing some of the details that's a bit tricky. So it's a really good SaaS solution for you. Azure Monitor for SAP. So for all those SAP users out there, there's a bunch of things that Azure Monitor can now hook into and give you a bit more visibility as to what's going on. I'm not going to go through it all. JMS 2.0 over AMPQ. So that's something that's looking interesting. So it's a preview at the moment. These are the features that are currently available. They're aiming for full parity by GA, but right now you can do a bunch of stuff, and that's a lot of stuff already. So if you're looking for, how to do JMS in Azure over AMPQ, which is really, if you're looking for any interoperable messaging, that's kind of where you should be looking at AMPQ. So yeah, it's pretty cool. NFS 3.0 support for blob storage. So that's gone into preview. So it's really suited for large scale, heavy sequential read workloads. It's really good from the performance perspective. It's a limited preview in a number of places at the moment, but as that goes live, that's going to be rolled out more and more. Alrighty, so a couple of events. So integration down under. So check this out if you're interested in integration stuff. It's pretty cool. So that's happening. It's tomorrow, I believe, isn't it? Tomorrow, yeah.
Yes, next slide.
Next slide. Sorry, there we go. It's already prepared. So Cosmos DB, lessons learned from the front line. So if you're interested in Cosmos DB integration, check it out. It's pretty cool. Alrighty, couple of resources. I read them out every time, so this time I'm not. All right, without any further ado, I want to introduce a very special international guest speaker. So Wagner is coming to you from New Zealand, in person, digitally, and he's here to talk to you about API management. So over to you, Wagner.
Thanks, man. There we go. And we should be ready to go. So you should be seeing my full screen, ready to present.
Yep, we can see it.
Cool. So again, good evening, and thanks for having me from across the ditch. Right. So tonight we're going to be talking about API management, and more specifically about the VS Code extension. Right. If you're using API management until some time ago, you have to do everything that you needed on the portal, and that was a little bit of cumbersome. Now we have a much better developer experience for that, and that's what we could be talking tonight. So a little bit more about me. I'm the principal integration architect at Theta, and I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP specializing in integration and cloud architecture. I am a MCSE for the cloud platform, right? About to renew all the certificates because we've been changing that so fast that every 2 years you have to renew pretty much everything. And here in New Zealand, I'm one of the Auckland Connected Systems user group organizers, and also one of the Integration Down Under organizers, right? So thanks for the shout out. The meeting tomorrow with Will Valida is going to be awesome. I saw him talking before, and he's a really good presenter. And the topic is also quite interesting. So what we have in the agenda for today? I'm going to do a quick API management introduction, right? So explain a little bit more, or again, what is API management for some of you that might not be used to that. Then we're going to be talking about policies, because when using the VS Code extension, chances are that most of the things that you're going to be doing there is going to be writing custom policies. So we're going to explain what it is, how those policies are used, and why it's so important to actually pay attention to that. Then show how important or how customizable those policies are, to the point where you can actually write C# code inside that. At that point of between the policy expressions and the VS Code extension, I'm going to do a little pause. And if you have any questions about API management in general, we can stop there and have those questions. Then after that, I'm going to show you what is the Visual Studio Code extension, and spend most of the time in Visual Studio Code with you guys, going through and showing what the extension can give to us on that.
Wagner,
then finally, yes?
Just wanted to let you know your little mini Teams player window is covering some of your slide, the lower right corner.
That
so
one?
I don't know if, yeah, you might want to. There we go. Awesome.
Cool. Okay. And finally, we're going to have some takeaways. That's like what I want you guys to take out of this meeting. So let's start with API management in a slide. I think from my point of view, API management comes to kind of solve one problem. And the problem is we have API publishers on one side, and those API publishers are busy creating APIs and ready for them to use, creating things for people to use. On the other side, we have app developers that want to use those APIs, and they don't know how they can have access to that, right? While the API publishers are writing APIs in multiple types of platforms, multiple types of technologies, sometimes even on premises, they wanted a way for those app developers to consume. But the only thing that the app developers want is actually to write the first or third-party apps and talk to those APIs in a seamless way. They don't want you to learn 5 different ways to connect to that. They don't want you to learn or have the keys for 10 different technologies and things like that. That's where API management comes, right? So API management gives you a set of tools or a set of components to help you to manage this ecosystem that we're talking now. So one side, we have the ability to create, curate, and publish those APIs that you're writing on the back end in an easy way. And before that, we only have the Azure portal, but now we also have the VS Code with the VS Code extension to a point. On the other side, we have a developer portal that allows the application developers, as long as they are they have permissions to that, to discover those APIs, to test those APIs, and even to find snippets of code on how to better use that inside their technology of choice. And most important, you have a gateway that during runtime mediates the communication between the first party or third-party applications and the backend systems where you wrote those APIs, exposing a very organized approach for that, right? So all your APIs, although they are different backends, they are going to be exposed through the same URI or a set of domains that you choose. And they are going to be put together in domains and things like that. So in a nutshell, this is what API management gives to you. Then one of the main things that that API management gives from a configuration point of view or an extension point of view, on top of just connecting those first parties with the backends, is the ability to create policies. And what are those policies? So the policies encapsulate some of the common API management functions, like instead of having to write access control or authentication at all the backend APIs, I can configure that at the API management, and I can configure that in different layers. So you can use different types of authentications or access controls in different places, right? You can protect against the abuse, like having quotas and having rate limits for those APIs. And again, you can configure all of that at the API management instead of having to cater for that on your code. You can transform the message receiving or the client into the backend or vice versa. That means that you can modernize things like your old WCF services and expose that as a nice REST API, for example. Can also do caching, etc. All right. So the idea is those policies are chained together into a pipeline. So you would know that I'm going to have an authentication and a rate limit and a transformation, then an error handling, and all of that is going to be chained together in a request response kind of pipeline. In the end, what the policies does is mutate the request and response context or change the API behavior, right? So what they can do, for example, is I have an old API that was created as some kind of RPC style. So everything was posts. Doesn't matter if I'm doing a request, and I wanted to modernize that and create that as a proper REST format. And then I can say that my gets on the way in are going to be transformed in a post on the get content on the backend, or I can receive a message that accepts JSON on the way in, but transforms on XML and send it to the backend, and after that transforms back from XML into JSON and sends the way out. And what we're going to see soon is that can be applied in a variety of scopes. So the API management allow you to define different scopes to group APIs together, and or to group operations of APIs together in a way. And you can apply policies at any one of those levels. Usually those policies are set in an inbound direction and an outbound direction. Coming from the client into the backend, getting the response of the errors from the backend into the client. And it also can be triggered when you have errors, which is can be really good to transform the errors that you receive or hide some of the ugliness of your old code and reset those errors into something that is more proper to a modern application to present. So how those policies are executed, right? What are those scopes that I was talking before? So you have a global scope, and that is means the whole API management instance, right? So you can write something that applies every API, every operation, and every group of APIs in a way, straight away, right? Then API management has this concept of products, and what products are a group of APIs put together. So, for example, I could have my, if you think in an API economy, I could have my premium product that presents 3 sets of domains that I sell APIs for, or I can have my domain 1 product, my domain 2 product, and my domain 3 product. And at each one of those different products, I can set different rate limits. So my premium user, because it's paying, he can have more access to all those APIs, while my domain 1 or domain 2 might have a smaller quota or a smaller rate of execution. Then you have the boundary of an API, right, which is a group of operations for that same or for, in theory, the same resource or some resources. and you have the operation itself. So if you look at this example here, I could apply, for example, cores at a global level and log at a global level. That means that those policies, I would be logging everything, but I only have to write that policy once. And I would be applying the same cores policies for every single API inside my instance. I could have the rate and quota, that is the classic ones that we talked before, at the product level. I could have my authorization or my JWT, the token validation, at the API level. And I could have my cache, my URL redirections, and my body redirections at an operation level, right? Just to give an example of that, if I call in a get on a full bar, right, for the host API contoso.com and a key of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the key would represent the product. So a key or a subscription key is associated to a product that has one or more APIs inside that. Then the full, in this case, would be the API, right? On API management, what you have is the APIs are going to be path-based. So the first resource or the part of that that path is going to indicate the API. Then the bar, in this case, with the get, would represent the operation. Before, when I started working with that, I thought that those scopes or those policies were applied pretty much as I was explaining that to you. First, I apply the global policies, then I apply the product policies, then I apply the API, then I apply the operation. But what I found later on is actually every time that API management needs to evaluate policies, what it puts together is it gets the slice of that request. So my get full bar for key 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. Then they put all those set of policies together, and that defines your effective policy. So the reason I'm talking about that is because later on, you're going to find that you should be able, for example, to know which product you're talking about, or even which operation you're trying to execute, while you're still writing a policy at the product level, or know what is the product and operation when you're writing a policy at the API level. And that opened my eyes a lot to allow to do something like really advanced scenarios on policies. A little bit of a shout on that one. If you wanted to know more about those policies executions and tips and tricks on policies, last month I did a presentation on integration down under. 2 months ago, right? So we have that on our YouTube channel. Maybe then can put that on the Q&A session later on, the link for that one. And finally, let's talk about policy expressions. What policy expressions are? A set of C# snippets that can be used inside policies. So now, apart from things that API management gives to you, you should also be able to write a little bit of the C# code and embedding certain key places of those policies. And that makes the whole policy thing much more powerful than just what comes out of the box with API management, right? The policies are going to give you read-only access to the request context. That means that during that time, you have access to the whole, what was the request body, what is the method, what is the path, what is the query string, the headers, all that kind of stuff. It can use kind of a subset of .NET types. It's kind of a whitelisted block, an allowed list of the items, right? And you should be able to find all of those lists inside the documentation. The good thing about that is that you can, using those C# snippets, now you can dynamically configure or conditionally execute some of the policies. You can do something like, if my header X has this value, execute that part of the policy, otherwise execute that other part of the policy. And it can also be used on name values, right? So it's something that I found later in the game. Name values in API management is exactly what the name says, is a group of name value pairs that you can apply on your policies. Is a way to parameterize that and get external configuration into those policies. That changes, for example, across environments, or that you wanted to apply. So in that little snippet here, you can see that the bracket privileged API rows. This is actually the format of the name values, and I can inject that into my policies. And the way that it executes is when they're rendering the policy to then execute, when they're doing that effective policy, it goes to the name values, bring and replace that value. After that, it executes the code, right? So you are able to actually inject some pre-canned data somewhere and just replace that when you're going across different environments. So that was a 101 view on API management, and a really fast-paced one, right? So I'll do an intermission. You guys can go out and have some coffee. No, not really. But if you have any questions at this time, then would be very welcome. Otherwise, if we don't have any questions open, then I'll move on to Visual Studio code extensions and start talking about that.
There are no questions right now in the Q&A, Wagner.
Okay, so going once, going twice. Let's go to the next part. So let's introduce the Visual Studio Code extension, right? The first question is, why a VS Code extension? It's API management, it's configuration, right? So why do we need to write that in the code? What we find out when you're actually working with this, and based on what we discussed so far, you see that those policies, they are much closer to actually cutting code or working with some kind of domain-driven language than actually just management and configuration. And doing that on the Azure portal can be quite cumbersome because you don't have enough, sometimes you don't have enough real estate, or the way that it saves might be more complicated than what you would expect. It might take longer for them to analyze the code that you have in there. And one thing that I found, for example, is if you don't have the dependencies in place when you're saving some of those policies, then you have to open another window, try to put your dependencies in places, then come back and doing that, right? The Visual Studio Code, the extension tries to solve a lot of that and actually make it the development environment for the people that is actually composing and publishing those APIs much more comfortable, because it's these things that you're using for the other stuff, right? And also allow you to do kind of a little bit of multitask, moving between things and then saving a group of things together. The other thing that Visual Studio Code extension gives to you that is really powerful is the ability to, behind the scenes, apply the API management extractor open source components that Microsoft created a while ago, and then generate the YARN templates associated to your API management API or the whole instance. And with that, you're able to actually work on that environment, then generate some code, push that to source control, and then started with the pipeline, CI/CD pipeline to push that to other environments, right? So we're going to see a little bit of that today. I'm not going as far as pushing that to Azure DevOps, but I can show you how we're able to create those APIs and then extract that API and generate the set of ARM templates that is going to be used. So based on that, what can I do with those extensions, right? I can list all my API management instances in any subscription that I have available. So associated to an Azure account. So what I'm going to see there is a list of Azure subscriptions. And then from those Azure subscriptions, I can expand. I'm going to see my API management instances. And from there, I'm going to see a set of things inside that. I can import APIs from an open API definition, right? So if I was working on an API on my backend and I generated an open API definition, the good old Swagger file, I can get that Swagger file and import it on API management and from the Visual Code extension and work on that. I can import API from app services, so I can point to app services on that subscription. And for on that means both web apps and functions, right? And it's going to generate the API associated to that, assuming that you have deployed an API or a set of functions on that case. I can define the policies that we were talking before, and for me, this is the place where I personally spend more time with the code extension. But I can also test those APIs. So part of creating those policies because you wanted to change how your API is behaving, right? And in order to do that, you need to test those APIs. So we're going to see how we can actually test those APIs and what happens with that. I can manage gateways. So I think end of last year, we had the ability to create custom gateways, both on the developer instance and premium instances. And although you're not able to create new gateways, once you have a gateway on the portal, you should be able to get the Docker commands to run that, or the Kubernetes commands, and also add or remove APIs to that managed gateway. You can manage name values, so you can create and edit and delete name values, which is going to be quite useful, and you're going to see why in a minute. You can manage products, and as I said before, the product is kind of a way to group APIs for you to manage or give control to a client for that instead of give control to individual instances of APIs. So in this case, what can't I do with the extension? I cannot create a fully empty API, right? For that, you still have to use the portal. To be honest, you probably should be able to create like an empty Swagger and push it up, but you still would be like importing a Swagger. So just right click and create new. You're not able to do that today. You cannot create APIs from other definitions. You know, if you've been using API management, you know that you can point that to a logic apps. I think if I'm not wrong now, to a Power App or to a Flow, but you can also do that for the WSDOs and WADLs, right? They did some crazy Java definitions, and you're not able to use those ones yet. I think what they find out is like 90% of the cases, people are creating APIs from the open API definitions. That's what they included on the extension. There's nothing stopping you to create that second part. It's just that it's not there yet. You cannot manage subscriptions. So those subscription keys that we discussed before that is associated to products, you're not able to do that on the extension. You needed to do that on the portal, and kind of makes sense because that is really a proper account management or something like that, instead of more related to coding. But you're going to see that you're able to get a very key subscription from the extension that help you with the execution. You cannot create new products, probably for the same reason. You're not able to create new gateways, right? So with that, let's stop talking and actually go to the Visual Studio Code and take a look at the API or the extension. So first things first, in order to find the extension, you're going to look for that component here, is the Azure API Management, right? And when you install that, is going to be installing the Azure API Management and some dependencies, which is the Azure account. And that Azure account is the one that actually connects you to an Azure account. And then from there, you have access to Azure impersonating that user. And the REST client that is going to be using to execute the tests. Okay. Once you have that installed, and I really toyed with the idea of uninstalling and installing again, but I think I would be tempting the demo gods too much, so I didn't. Right. Once you find that, you're going to find the Azure, the Azure entry here at the sidebar, and in there, you're going to find API Management, right? First time that you're going to use that, you needed to sign into Azure. And in order to do that, you just click. It's going to open a session, right? You select one of your accounts, use another account. Then it let you know, yes, you're all signed in, you can go back. And when you come back, now you have all all Azure subscriptions that are associated to that account on that tenant, on the default tenant. Okay, that's probably one thing that is important. It is going to be associated to your default tenant. If you have other tenants on that one, it wouldn't be showing here. Then after you do that, you should be able to open your subscription. Actually, sorry, those other are different tenants. Ocean Bridge is a different tenant. First Gas, yeah. So you should be able to see the subscriptions from other tenants as well, as long as associated to that specific user account. Okay. So in here you'll see the list of all the APIs, API management instance that you have installed, and that doesn't matter what is the tier of your API management, because in there I have dev, I have two devs, I have two consumptions, right? And all of them are showing here. So what we can see on that, you can see a list of your APIs, right? The global policy, in this case, is that first policy that we talked, that is for everything. Name values and products. If I go to my dev instance, because my dev instance also allow me to have the access to gateways, we also see gateways here. Okay, so underneath that, you're going to see a list of all the APIs. And if you have like version sets, you're going to have to see the versions. Right, so APIs with versions, you would be seeing like this. You're going to see all the gateways. So the list of the gateways that you have available. and the APIs that are associated to that gateway. You're going to see the name values, like all the name values, and the products with the APIs associated to them and the policies associated to them, right? So first thing that you can probably do here is I'm going to be using my consumption version. I can import from an open API file. Probably time to start to pray for the demo gods, because first demo is going to start now. And I'll go down to Brisbane, get that Swagger, and inside that Swagger, I have a API with 2 operations. So if everything goes according to the plan, I should give it a name, and I'm going to be calling that customer API. And fingers crossed is importing. Come on, demo gods. Actually, last time that it crashed really quickly. Yes. So API management is being imported successfully. If I come and refresh this, I should have a customer API with 2 operations, a get customer by ID and an update customer by ID. Okay. So what else can we do here in this case? What I can do is I can edit that open API. Or I can import an Azure function, or I can import an Azure App Service, or I can simply now into the ARM template that I discussed before, right? But let's try to really tempt the gods and edit that API. So let me get this bigger. There we go. Yes, thank you. Don't need this view. What is my zoom? Plus. Control plus. There we go. Does it look okay? I assume so. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to include a new path right after that one. And on that path, I'm going to add a new operation, right? But because I already have that prepared before, and I don't want to tempt the whole thing, I'm going to get the whole path. There you go. I'm adding this new operation here. And then I'll explain what the operation is doing. So what I'm doing on that one is I'm creating new customer. And you can see I basically copied the put operation, but doing as a create, right? Somebody's creating new customer. I have a new parameter in the body that is using more or less the same, just for the simplicity, the same definition as the customer update. It accepts the consumes application JSON. It produces application JSON and have a 200 response passing back customer update response, right? And I have a sample associated to that. So you can see that that was similar to what this put was doing here. Okay, but now if I wrote all of that correctly, I can simply save this and is applying the change to that API management instance. And you can see that it's actually writing that as a set of JSON files and trying to push that back. And if everything goes okay, back at that API, we're going to have now a third operation. Let's see. So what is my? So in here now, I have a post, right? There we go. And the put. And what I'm going to do is concentrate on that post. Let's try to do that. How attach this thing? I actually can go and do a test operation. And if I do this, what I'm doing here is simply using that client REST, and it knows where to go, right? It can go, knows like how to write all of those, and knows what to put on the request here to execute that request. But in my case, I need one more thing, that is that subscription key. And that subscription key, as I said before, you're not able to access or manage subscriptions. But there is one specific subscription key that we use for the development all the time, and you're able to get a copy. Right? So that is the subscription key that you use when you are in the portal all the time. And now I can put that here. And of course, I'm going to be changing that as soon as you do that. So if you guys are printing screen, don't. So now I can simply click on send request, and heads up, what we're expecting to see here is a 500. Okay, so don't get too mad if you see a 500, because that's exactly what I'm expecting to see. If I see anything different, then that would be a problem. And there we go. Just let me close this. We receive a 500. I execute that. I receive a 500. But most important, I actually receive the tracing of that, because on the side, you have OCP AP trace equals true. Okay. And this is where this whole thing here is starting to get the whole Visual Studio Code start to get really beautiful. Before, when using that on the portal, you have to try to use this information to actually when using Postman and things like that, the portal at least give you some information. But on the Postman, you have to copy this and run on somewhere else. In here, you can simply copy and do another get. Come on, something wrong with my Visual Studio Code. So let me close that and open again, because I don't think that's a problem with the actual thing. So I'll execute it one more time. Get the error. Small. To be my Windows don't want to copy and paste for some reason. So let's try the old ways. Bear with me, operator. There we go. Our API with operation, our get. Let's test. Let's put this here. This. There we go. So now you're copying. Finally. Okay, so I copy that, and I can actually execute this by calling the command palette and running the send request, right? So what that trace does is actually allow you to go and see each one of the policies and how they are operated, right? But right now, you don't have any real policy. But one thing that it's doing is going to be like really down here somewhere after the course and everything. It says, I'm sending a get to this sample API customer with that information, right? Problem is, this endpoint doesn't exist yet because I just created the API management to give it to external people to test that while I'm actually writing the backend sample. So what I need to do is to create a way to mock that. And that's one of the things that we can do with policy, right? So if I go and get that customer ID and go to the policy, make that a little bit smaller because I think it's too big. And write an inbound to say mock response, status code 200, content type application/JSON. So If we have a sample for that, then this probably would work. And you see that when I did like Control S, straight away the policies were updated to the cloud. That means that now that policy is written, and I can go and try to test that one again. And if we send the request, now we receive a 200, right? With a mock example. Straight away. So that means that is and you see that I did all of this just on that same environment and working relatively fast instead of having to write that in the portal, go to some other application to do the tests. And then what we can do now is see what actually happened on that trace, because usually that's what we're doing when you're doing I was doing that again. Okay, forget about it because my copy and paste here is getting a little bit wonky. But you can get that information and look at what is that happening on the API, right? So the other thing we can do with that close all of this. The other thing I can do is, now that I change that customer API and I have like some policies there for those 3 operations and things like that, I might want to go and actually extract that API. And I'm going to be extracting that API into a folder called API customer. Now it's going to be running and generating the ARM template for specifically for that customer API. Takes a little while. It connects as myself. So you need permission to do that. And it's going to be executing this. Now it's running all the commands that it needs to do that. And you're going to see that this command is actually the API Management Extractor component that you can find on GitHub. So when that finishes, what we're going to find is, if I open that folder, you're going to find a set of templates, right? And in here, we're going to find all the templates that it uses. So here is the API, customer API template, right? Which is basically that is that open API definition in here. But that is written in a way that you can import that as an ARM template, right? The other thing that you're going to have here is, for example, all the policies are extracted on this one, right? So the policy that I wrote is here, and I can actually just change that one. And any global service policies that we have. Some tricks with that, though, is when you're doing this, it's actually going to extract all the backend items that you have already, right? And this can be a pain, because if you're creating just that particular API, you would only need one of the backend templates. So that is one kind of not necessarily a bug, because that is not going to break anything when you're trying to import that. But on this case, you're going to have more information there than what you need. And one thing that I only noticed that before, because I was writing a blog post, and before I had run a process for a client on my dev instance, and in the end I have the backend of that client there. So when I wrote the blog post and I generated all all that data, and I published that on a GitHub, the client came back and say, hey, you have information about our backend on your GitHub. Can you please remove that? When I look at that, it was just a mock, so it was not too bad. But potentially, I could have been show information from a client when I didn't want to. So be aware that the consumption backend template and also the name values template should be the look, right? Because that one, for example, it's actually showing the name values as in clear text. Okay, so you need to be really careful with those two. But once you have that template, you should be able to load these templates, because this is pretty much just a set of ARM templates. You should be able to get those templates and load that in the order using your CI/CD pipeline, or just running the ARM template commands, and you'd have those three, or this consumption API that you created on other environments. And because you're creating like this, right, you have parameters. So you can say what is the API management service name, the URL. So you have a whole lot of things here that you can parameterize, and you can parameterize other components if you want that as well. Then how are we going with time?
You're fine.
Okay.
You can keep going if you want.
I think I'm going to show another couple of things, then open up for questions, because I think what I wanted was to show pretty much what I just showed, right? How we can start using that component. I'll show one more thing. Strange that my machine is a bit crazy today. It's losing the authentication all the time. But I'll show one more thing that I found quite useful, again, when I'm using policies for that. So let's say that on this other operation here, what is it? The customer API. And then on my put operation, on my policy, I wanted to create a different type of policy. I wanted to say choose when, just let me see that put operation again, we pass in an ID, right? So let's see if I can remember that one. And context dot request dot parameters ID equals 1. Then we're going to be doing something. And what I'm going to do is return a response of 200 Prism code. Okay. I'm not going to be putting any extra headers on that. Actually, I'll do context type application/JSON. And on the body, I don't want to set a body here, right? What I wanted to do is I want to create a customer put operation response. So I wanted to actually get that from name values. But what's going to happen is if I try to save that now, it's going to say that I can find that customer put operation response name value, right? If I was doing that in the portal, and that was always an annoying case, I would have to go leave that screen or duplicate a tab, go through the whole process to create this, then come back to that policy. Because we have access to name values here, I can simply come to create name value, and this is the ID. The value of this is going to be not really a customer, right? So let's say ID one, name, and Azure user group. And that looks like a valid JSON, right? Is this a secret? Not really. So it should be create that name value, and then after that, I should be able to save that. Then it's just a matter of if I wrote the context request parameters the right way. Just wait a little bit to save that. There you go. So now I have that in the right place. Let's really tempt the demo gods, because I'm not sure if that is correct, but the rest it is. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to be putting the subscription key here. I'll change that to 1. And of course, that bit was wrong. So let's see what was wrong there. I'm pretty sure it is saying that I didn't like that that bit there. Oh, no, I don't want another one. I don't want another one. I just want you to close that one. There we go. Can I spend all? request headers. I'm really having a run. Let's go to the trusty Notepad++. Sorry, need to be faster. So if I look at the try to find the choose here. Oh, there's something really wrong with my Visual Studio Code today. Let's try that again. Let's test. There we go. With that subscription key. Run. Forget it. Okay, so
Wagner, I think that you might have wrote context key instead of content type. Sorry, I mean context type instead of content type. Would that be causing issues?
I don't think that that would be the one, but let's see. There we go. iRequest doesn't have a parameter for content, so now it finding the error, and we should be able to find that really quickly with good old Microsoft Docs, since we have time, because that's a place where I wanted to show you guys anyway. APIM custom expressions. That page, API Management Policy Expressions, is quite useful because in here it shows all the .NET Framework components that are available, right? And it shows the context variable, everything that you have available on that. So under request, I have the body, I have the headers, and under context, try to find parameters here. Let's see if it likes this. Don't do that at home, kids. But the right way to do is was supposed to be casting that to int, right? But right now, just let's see if that works. So the good thing about all of that going wrong is that actually show you exactly why you should be using Visual Studio Code. Still got that wrong. My policy is not working fine. I'm not going to spend the rest of you guys' night with that, right? I think you get the gist of what we're trying to show on the Visual Studio Code, which is the ability to jump quickly between your instance on the cloud of API management with your local area where you can implement all of that kind of stuff. And with that, you have a much streamlined development experience and able to do all those tests and things like that. It would be even better if my Visual Studio Code was actually helping me and working with the copy and paste. There's nothing to do with the API management extension in this case. So let me go back to the presentation. And just go through some parting things. What I hope you got on that is that Visual Studio Code extension is quite powerful, right? It allows you to have access to most of the things on the API management instance that requires like hands-on work, like especially when you are on the composing, publishing APIs, right? And that's what it's aimed for. It's not for the people that is managing this. It's for the people that is actually creating APIs, developing policies, testing if those policies are working fine, and then publishing that into source control so you can actually push that to the other environments. So it streamlines your development experience, because if it was a pain seeing that policy not working here, where you could do like all those rounds really quick, doing that on the portal was really a nightmare, because you would be saving, clicking on test, going somewhere else, having to write all your parameters again, run the test to then get the error, come back, rinse and repeat. Here, everything was in the same place. I had like my test already set up. To be honest, I could save that and even parameterize if I wanted to, right to a point. And it can help you to extract that existing configuration. And because of that, it allows you to then generate all that code as an ARM template to push into your CI/CD pipeline. Then you said that one of the next that you had a lineup was about CI/CD for API management.
Yes, I think somebody who's going to present, not next month, but possibly in the future, had a talk about that.
Okay, so that would be like a good segue to that point. And if I'll have to get like 3 things for you to take out of that, hopefully you took those 3 points out of this, right? And with that, you the only other thing I would add is that it is open source, right? So things like what you said, so that I was complaining about it pushing all the backend items, pushing all the name values, you potentially should be able to access that code of that extraction bit and fix it. Or things that we're seeing on the API, I cannot create a new empty API, or I cannot see subscriptions or things like that. If you think is important, you should be able to contribute to the open source project. Now with that, thanks for listening to me for almost an hour, right? If you wanted to get in touch with me, you can go through W. Silveira and said on Twitter, wagner.silveira@noteyourself.tech, which is my the email associated to my blog. Or if you wanted to see more about API management and other things around Azure and integration, I maintain a blog post that is relatively up to date, right? So on https note-to-self.tech. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and then if we have any people have any questions, we can go through the questions now.
Great. We actually have no questions. So
Oh.
You obviously were so clear about everything. Everybody understood it, which is fantastic.
Or didn't understood anything, but it's one of the other.
maybe, but yeah, thanks, Wagner. That was an awesome presentation and some really interesting demos. And even when things go wrong, it helps you. It shows how Visual Studio Code can help you with troubleshooting that. So that's really that is really excellent.
Mm-hmm,
you probably wouldn't know from attending our group, but we always appreciate our speakers, Wagner, and we always try to give them a little bit of a gesture of gratitude and appreciation for it. Now, the only problem is that this being an international presentation, I'm not sure exactly how strict customs are with New Zealand, but we'll give it our best shot. So, Wagner, thanks very much for your presentation. Here you go. And let's see how that. Oh,
damn it. Well, the good thing is that I actually don't drink, right? Because of the half of that stayed in custom. But thanks,
rascals.
guys. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So yeah, excellent. Thank you very much again, Wagner, and thank you for everybody who came tonight and attended the presentation. So as you saw, we've got a great topic lined up for next month. And we hope to see you. There will be a recording for tonight. This has been recorded, and just give me a few days, maybe over the weekend at some point. I'll get it up there on the site somewhere, and just check the comments in Meetup, and you'll see it there. And we'll also, of course, we post a slide deck for the Meetup slides. And I don't know, Wagner, if you want to share your slide deck, but you know, you can always.
I'll definitely share that. I'll put that on slide share and push to you guys. Or actually send it to you, and you can share the same way that you share the other ones.
Fantastic. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks very much. So with that, we'll say good night and see you next month.
Thank
Cheers,
you,
everyone.
See you all.
Yes.